I freed him from his harness, for he was too busy taking views of the grass, the sky, the animals, and me, to perform this service for himself. I do not know if he was affected the way I was, for his deceptively genial face showed no emotion as he went on aiming his camera here and there with sour thoroughness. Then, apparently satisfied for the moment, he applied himself once more to the nasal syringe and the pillboxes. On Goots, however, the consequence of the landing must have been much the same as on me. He, too, capered and sang, and his dialect renderings reached a new low, such as even a burlesque show comedian would have spurned. "'Tis the old sword itself," he kept repeating. "Erin go bragh, up, Dev!" And he laughed inanely. We must have wasted fully an hour in this fashion before enough coolness returned to allow anything like calm observation. When it did, we unpacked the equipment, despite obstacles interposed by Goots, who, still hilarious, found great delight in making the various instruments disappear and reappear unexpectedly. It was quite complete, and we, or rather Slafe, recorded the thermometer and barometer readings as well as the wind direction and altitude, these to be later compared with others taken under normal conditions at the same hour. Included in the gear were telescope and binoculars. These we put to our eyes only to realize with surprise that we were located in the center of a hollow bowl, perhaps 150 or 200 feet across, and that an horizon of upsurging vegetation cut off our view of anything except the sky itself. I could have sworn we had landed on a flat plateau, if indeed the contour had not sloped upward to a cap. How, then, did we come to find ourselves in a depression? Did the grass shift like the sea it resembled? Or, incredible thought, had our weight caused us to sink imperceptibly into a soft and treacherous bed? I felt my happiness oozing away. What is man, I thought, but a pygmy trapped in a bowl, bounded by an unknown beginning and headed for a concealed destination? It was sweet to be, but whether good or evil lay in the unseen, who knew? Uneasiness, which did not quite displace my earlier buoyancy, took hold of me. The animals, in contrast, gave no signals of disquiet. They cropped at the grass without nervousness, perhaps more from habit than hunger. They did not seem to be obtaining much sustenance. Clearly, they found it hard to bite off mouthfuls of forage. Rather, they chewed sideways, like a cat, at the tough, rubbery tendrils. "I tank I want to go home. Anyways, I tank I want to get out of this hole," remarked Goots. Slafe had unpacked another camera and attached various gadgets to it, pursing his lips and running his hands lovingly over the assembled product before thrusting it downward into the stolons, where queer shocks of radiance seemed to indicate he was taking flashlight pictures of the subsurface. But the sheep and the cameraman could not distract my attention from the appearance of a trap which the basin of grass was assuming, while Goots was so volatile he couldn't even put on a simulated stoicism. In a panic, I started to climb frantically. All the elation of my first encounter with the mound completely evaporated. The goat raised her head to note my undignified scrambling, but the sheep kept up their determined nibbling. The trough, as I said, could not have been more than a couple of 100 feet across, and though the loose runners impeded my progress, I must have covered twice the distance to the edge of the rim before I realized it was as far from me as when I had started. Goots, going in a direction oblique to mine, had no better success. His waving arms and struggling body indicated his awareness of his predicament. Only Slafe was undisturbed, perhaps unconscious of our efforts, for he had taken out still another camera and was lying on his back, pointing it over our heads at the boundary of grass and sky. Hysteria burned my lungs as I continued the dreamlike battle upward. Fear may have confused me, but it seemed as though the enveloping weed was now positively, rather than merely negatively, hampering me. The runners whipped around my legs in clinging spirals. The surface, always soft, now developed treacherous spots like quicksands, and while one foot remained comparatively secure, the other sank deeply, tripping me. Prone, the entangling fronds caught at my arms and neck. The green blades, no longer tender, scratched my face and smothered my useless cries for help. I sobbed childishly, knowing myself doomed to die in this awful morass, drowned in an unnatural sea. So despairing were my thoughts that I gave up all struggle and lay there weakly crying when I noticed the grass relaxing its hold. I was sinking in no further. Indeed, it seemed the lightest effort would set me free. I rose to my knees, and finally to my feet, but I was so shaken by my battle I made no attempt to continue forward, but stood gazing around me, marveling that I was still, if only for a few more moments, alive. "Belly belong, you walk about too much, eh? Him fella look, no got belly." Goots had given up his endeavor to reach the rim, and apparently struggled all the way over to impart, if I understood his bêche de mer, this absurd and self-evident piece of information. "This is hardly a time for levity," I rebuked him coldly. "Couldn't think of a better. Reality is escaped through one flippancy or another. Rafe has his," he waved his hand toward the still industrious cameraman, "and I have mine. I bet W.R. has a telescope or a periscope or a spectroscope somehow trained on us right now, and will see to it the rescue party arrives 10 minutes after all life is extinct." To tell the truth, I'd forgotten our expedition was but a stunt initiated by the Daily Intelligencer to rebound to its greater publicity. Here in this isolate cup, it was difficult to conceive of an anterior existence. I thought of myself as in some strange manner indigenous to and part of the weed. To recall now that we were here purposefully, that others were concerned with our venture, and that we might reasonably hope for succor, extricated me from my subjective entanglement with the grass much as the relaxation of my body a short while before freed me from its physical bonds. I looked hopefully at the empty sky. Of course we would get help at any moment. Once more my spirits were raised. There was no point in trying to get out of the depression now, seeing we could as easily be rescued from one portion of the grass as from another. Again the grass was soft and pleasant to touch, and Slate's preoccupation with his pictures no longer seemed either eccentric or heroic, but rather proper and sensible. Like Alice in the Red Queen, since we had given up trying to reach a particular spot, we found ourselves able to travel with comparative ease. We inspected Slate's activities with interest, and responded readily to his autocratic gestures, indicating positions and poses we should take in order to be incorporated in his record. But our gaiety was again succeeded by another period of despondency. We repeated all our antics, struggles, and despair. Again I fought madly against the enmeshing weed, and again I gave myself up to death, only to be revived in the moment of my resignation. The cameraman was still untouched by the successive waves of fear and joyfulness. Invincibly armored by some strange spirit, he kept on, although by now I could not understand, in those moments when I could think about anything other than the grass, what new material he could find for his film. Skyward and downward, to all points of the compass, holding his cameras at crazy angles, burlesquing all photographers, his zeal was unabated, unaffected even by the force of the grass. Our alternating moods underwent a subtle change. The spans of defeat grew longer, the moments of hope more fleeting. The sheep, too, at last were infected by uneasiness, bleating piteously skyward and making no attempt to nibble any longer. The goat, like Slafe, was unmoved. She disdained the emotional sheep. And now, with horror, I suddenly realized that a physical change had marched alongside the fluctuations of our temper. The circumference of the bowl was the same as at first, but imperceptibly, yet swiftly, the hollow had deepened, sunk farther from the sky. The walls had become almost perpendicular, and to my terror I found myself looking upward from the bottom of a pit at the retreating sky. I suppose everyone at some time has imagined himself irrevocably imprisoned, cast into some lightless dungeon, and left to die. Such visions implied human instrumentality, human whim, The most implacable jailer might relent,